The Christmas Banshee of Wavertree Lock-Up. Christmas Eve, the night meant for hope, had become something very different in Liverpool during the harsh winter of the 1840s. The city groaned beneath the weight of poverty and the shadow of cholera. Snow had fallen for days without pause, smothering the fields between Edge Hill and Wavertree, coating the roads so thickly that cartwheels sat frozen where they had stopped. By dusk, only the desperate stayed outdoors. That was the night the O'Shea family first saw the lock-up. Patrick O'Shea had carried his wife for the last mile, her fever-drained body limp as a child's. In his arms, beside him, his two daughters trudged through the snow that swallowed their legs to the knee. Their breath puffed out in tiny clouds, their shawls damp with sleet, froze stiff across their shoulders. Behind them staggered three more Irish families, refugees who had survived the famine only to find a different kind of cruelty in Liverpool. They had walked from cramped courts near Vauxhall Road, where the cholera had taken dozens that week. When Marie collapsed around sunset, the families had made a choice: leave her or find shelter quickly. Patrick refused to leave her, so they walked. The snowstorm worsened with every step. The wind stung their faces like needles. The lantern they had shared flickered so weakly, it seemed embarrassed to exit in the storm. The children whimpered with cold. The older men prayed under their breaths. In every direction, the world was nothing but white, as though heaven itself had fallen over Liverpool and forgotten to rise again. And ahead, a speck of dark stone, in howling white, sat the Wavertree Lock-Up. A miserable place, cold as an unused tomb, a relic from the 1700s, built from sandstone, rich in quartz veins that glittered faintly beneath the skin of ice. But to the O'Sheas, it looked like salvation. The families forced the door open, a heavy wooden slab, rimmed with frost, and stumbled inside. The air was barely warmer than the outside, but at least it was still. Water dripped rhythmically down the walls. The floor was hard, uneven stone. Wind whistled through the blind, square windows. But the lock-up had a roof, and tonight it was a blessing. Patrick laid Marie on a blanket of straw and old rags, her cheeks were the colour of snow they'd fought through. Her breath had grown shallow, and then stopped altogether, just as they reached the door. The children began to cry. Patrick sat down beside her and pressed his forehead to her cold cheek. The weight of the last month, the famine, the crossing, the filth of the Liverpool courts broke him in that moment. "It should have been me," he whispered, "not ye." Winter swallowed the sound of his sobbing, and as the storm thickened outside, hope withered inside the lock-up. Meanwhile, at his home in Sandy Knoll, the fire roared cheerfully in the grate. The Picton household was preparing for supper. Carols drifted faintly from the drawing room, but Sir James Picton, scholar, benefactor, architect, was not in the mood for festivity. He had read that afternoon about the refugees sheltering at the Lock-Up. "Christmas Eve or not," he said, fastening his great coat, "no one in Liverpool should starve in this weather." His footman, though reluctant, agreed to accompany him. They loaded baskets with bread, potatoes, cured ham, and bottles of warm ale. Then they stepped out into the teeth of the storm. Snow clogged the roads. Gas lamps flickered weakly behind their glass. Even the horses in their stables stamped nervously as the blizzard roared across the open fields. Picton trudged steadily ahead, head bowed, boots cracking, frozen puddles. The wind battered his cloak, ice formed on his moustache. But he pushed on, driven by a deep, stubborn sense of duty. Halfway to Mill Lane, his footman slipped on the ice and fell. Picton helped him up, but both men were shaking violently in the cold. By the time the Lock-Up finally came into view, "Nearly there," Picton said through chattering teeth. But as they approached, he slowed. Something wasn't right. Snow was swirling around the Lock-Up in a circular motion, not blowing across it, but gathering in it, spiraling like a white vortex. And light, a faint blue-white glow, pulsed between the stone blocks. Picton felt the hair on his arms rise beneath his coat. He took a step closer and heard a scream unlike anything he'd ever heard. Not human, not animal. A long, supernatural wail that screamed the memory of his bones. Inside the Lock-Up, Patrick had reached the end of reason. His daughters knelt beside their mother's body, clutching her lifeless hand. Another refugee woman had begun reciting a rosary through the broken sows. Patrick rose slowly, stepping over the straw face streaked with frozen tears. An old man from Galway, who had once told tales around firesides of rituals older than Christianity, stepped forward and whispered to him, "You know the words, boy, your grandmother taught you. Winter is the thin time. The stone here is right. The storm is right. If ever there was a night to call across the veil, 'tis this one." Patrick trembled. He remembered the stories. He remembered the warnings. A spell that required blood. A spell that required the storm. A spell that required stone with quartz to hold the energy. A spell used only when love had reached the point of ruin. He bowed his head, and he chose. He reached beneath his coat and pulled out the only living thing he had left to offer, the old magic. A small cockerel they had been saving to eat on Christmas Day. "I'm sorry, little one," he whispered. The blade flashed. Blood spilled onto the cold stone, hissing as it touched the sigil. He began to draw an ancient Celtic spiral, meant to twist fate itself. The quartz veins in the walls glimmered faintly, as though awakening to the ritual. Patrick began to chant. The old Irish words shook in his throat with fear. The storm outside thickened, pressing against the building like a living thing, and Marie's body shuddered once, then fell still again. But Patrick didn't stop. He couldn't. Picton pushed open the lock-up door, expecting misery, hunger, maybe death. He did not expect what he saw. Candles flickered in a circle, blood stained the stones. Refugees knelt in terror and prayer, and in the centre, Patrick stood over his wife's body, chanting with a voice that seemed not entirely his own. Blue-white sparks crawled across the corpse, heavy sandstone. The air crackled like static, and the sigil pulsed like a beating heart. Then Picton looked upwards. A pale shape hovered through the open roof vent, drifting just above a weather vane he had installed years earlier. It was a woman, shaped blur of snow and shadow, long hair whipping like seaweed in a storm. Then it opened its mouth. The wail that burst forth shook snow from the refuge. Picton's foot dropped to his knees, covering his ears. Picton himself staggered backwards, eyes wide in disbelief. But he could not look away. The Banshee dipped lower, its neighing rising into a piercing shriek, and a bolt of lightning slammed down from the sky that had no thunder. It struck the vane, jumped to the sigil, exploded through the lock-up in a blinding flash. Marie jolted upright with a gasp. Her daughter screamed, not in fear, but in joy. She blinked, her lips parted. She breathed. A dead woman resurrected on Christmas Eve. My blood stole and stole. Patrick fell to his knees, sobbing, clutching her, as though afraid she might dissolve. And Picton, well, Picton stared in wonder, horror, awe, and something far more dangerous, fascination. After that night, Picton sought Patrick relentlessly for answers, for secrets, for the ritual. He offered small fortunes, promised safety, pleaded with him, but Patrick refused. That magic answered me once, he said, and only because love had driven me mad with grief. Picton never forgot the Banshee, or the lightning, or the way the stone had glowed. It became his private obsession. When his beloved wife Sarah Pooley fell ill years later, Picton's desperation mirrored Patrick's on that long ago Christmas Eve. He tried doctors, he tried healers, he tried prayer. Nothing worked. The night she died, a winter storm rattled the windows of Sandy Knoll. Snow fell thick, enough to bury fences, and Picton made a decision from which he never recovered. He summoned his servants, he ordered them to lift her body, and he carried her under cover of darkness to the lock-up. Picton drew the sigil as he remembered. He lit candles, he whispered the old Irish words. He begged the storm to answer, but lightning never came. The court remained dark, the Banshee never appeared, and Sarah remained still. Picton fell to his knees broken, unable to resurrect her. He did the only thing he could. He built her a monument. The Picton clock, tall, solemn, and carved from the same kind of sandstone that failed to bring him back rose at the Wavertree crossroads. Upon it, he placed words that revealed his heartbreak. Time wasted is existence, used is life, and on the northern face a longer reflection on the cruel march of time. Hereby we see the minutes, how they run. How many make the hours full complete? How many hours bring about the day? How many days will finish up the year? So minutes, hours, days, weeks, months and years passed over to the end they were created, would bring white hairs unto a quiet grave. His confession in stone, his apology, his reminder to all who pass beneath it at Christmas. Love fiercely now, because even old magic answers only once. I am Mr. Strange, and this has been another tale from Liverpool's haunted past.